And now for more on this, we're joined by Wendy Wagner. She's a partner with the head of international trade and customs at Gowling WLG Canada. Thanks for joining us tonight, Wendy.
Thanks very much, Chris. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I want to get started right on Doug Ford's comments there that Ontario might cut off energy from the U.S. in relation to these threatened tariffs from Donald Trump. That's a pretty dramatic threat, as Catherine was just laying out. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it certainly is, and it just is a real indicator of how problematic this tariff threat is, that we are now in the position of considering some of these very dramatic matters. And the issue is that all of these retaliatory measures that Canada might take will also have a dramatic impact on Canadian business. So it's really, you can see why Premier Ford and the Prime Minister are looking at all options and almost presenting a carrot and stick type approach. But the problem with retaliation is that it tends to hurt the economy that's imposing it just as much as the economy that's subject to it.
Well, and if we were in a situation where the U.S. put an across-the-board tariff on Canadian goods and Canada did the same, certainly sounds like it would be disastrous for both countries. Walk us through that thought a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially what's being proposed here is almost a reversal of globalization. So we called this type of policy in economics a mercantilist policy, where you try and take all of your manufacturing and basically onshore it into your own country instead of trading with other economies, which is what in economic terms is supposed to lead to the greatest efficiencies and is why we have free trade and why we've developed integrated economies in the way that we have. So it's contrary to efficiency. And at least in the short term, it's bound to have pretty dramatic impacts on the prices that consumers pay for products and how industry functions and how their supply chains work, and the disruption to that, which, is really quite dramatic.
Well, and Canada and the U.S. are not the only players in the room here. We also have Mexico as well. And there have been some threats, some pretty hardline threats from Mexican officials in all of this. So what would be the impact if perhaps Mexico went and retaliated, but Canada did not? Where would we be left in that case?
I think that Canada can really take its own approach. It's difficult for both countries to determine what to do and what to say, because we all know that President-elect Trump has generally responded well to positions of power or, demonstrations of power. So the question is it harmful to take a conciliatory approach, or is it beneficial to take a conciliatory approach? You can see how that's a very difficult calculation. But, I think that from a Canadian-Mexican perspective, we really can chart our own path, even though we are members of one single trade agreement.
I know all of this is a bit of a thought experience here, because obviously these are just threats at this point from both sides. But if this were all to happen, what other markets would Canada need to try to tap into?
Sure. That's a difficult proposition. I mean, obviously, Canada does trade with a number of other countries, and there are markets available, but we have really tried hard to diversify our trade for decades. This has been a call to action that is not at all new. Economists have worried about our dependency on the U.S. economy for many, many years. The issue is that it's simply not that easy, because there are some natural factors that make the U.S. such a natural trading partner for us. It's the proximity, it's the convergence of standards and the harmonization that we have in many regulatory areas. It's our already integrated supply chains that make trade with the U.S. just so much easier and so much more viable than trade with other economies.
Front and center in all of this has been a lot of bluster. We've certainly seen these taunts from Trump in recent days, calling Trudeau, for example, the governor of the great state of Canada. And then meantime, we have Trudeau out there saying that Kamala Harris's loss was a setback for women's progress. So how do you think this back and forth at the top might potentially impact any real trade discussions here?
Hopefully, it is a lot of rhetoric because what's at stake for both economies and for businesses within both economies and consumers, and from an inflationary perspective, is really, really serious. So, hopefully, we have industry on both sides of the border, trade associations, state level and provincial level politicians stepping in and doing what they can to head this off, and all of the rest of it is noise and posturing. I'm really hopeful for that.
Okay, well, important discussion nonetheless. Wendy, thanks for hopping on the program and joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Wendy Wagner is a partner and the head of international trade and customs at Gowling WLG Canada.